Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will discuss about variables with CSharp. We will discuss what are different types of variables we have, how do we declare the variables, and how we use the different type of variable with their pros and cons, all with an example. So in our previous videos where we have discussed about the data type, we mentioned that there are two type of data type, value type and reference type. And with the value type, we mentioned that when you declare a value type, data type, let's take an example of integer in this case in the application where we have a num int as in value type, data type we have declared, and assigning a value, let's say number 10. So what is going to happen is it will assign the value 10 in a memory of a system when the program runs. Whatever amount of memory it requires to allocate in the system, it depends upon the type of data which you are using. For example, in this case int 32 is, so it will use a 32-bit of memory to it will use the 32-bit of memory in your from your system to save this information. Now assigning a value using the data type is good, that there's no issue with that, but why can't we assign the values to a data type like this, let's say 20, 90, 59, 78 and things like that? Why can't we do that? Why do we require to create these alphanumeric characters and then assign these values to these characters or these words? Why is it so? So the reason for that is when program or the compiler allocates memory for these values into the system, they allocate the memory into a on a particular address location. Now your compiler needs to know where exactly that address location is, right? Because as a programmer, if we are start going to use or declare the address location, then it is going to be hard to understand and memorize what those address locations looks like, right? Because ultimately all these variable values are stored in some address location inside your computer, some memory location inside your computer. Now to give a meaningful name to that memory location, we use these names, and that is what the variable is all about. So variable is basically representing a memory location for the values which you are assigning to your data type. Let's say here in this case int num or the num int is the variable which we have declared, and let's say in this case we are assigning a value 10 to this memory location or the variable name. So when the compiler runs the program, it knows that on this variable name what is the address location in which it needs to write the data. For example, in this case, what is the address location in which a program requires to write the data or fetch the data. So you do not have to worry about that. Similarly, from the program perspective, it will know that what is the specific address location is tied to which variable type. So for each variable, for each data type, you have to have the variable declared and then assign the values as and when you want. Now the property of this variable or the behavior of these variables are, as this is just representing the location of the memory, it's not representing the actual data which is written in the memory. So which means that the value of this variable can be changed within the program anywhere. What do I mean by that? let's say here I have declared the value of num int 3 as in 10 and I'm printing this value here. So program will save the value 10 somewhere in the memory location which this variable knows, and then whenever it requires to fetch, in this case it is fetching the value from that location, so it will print that value whichever has been written. Now what we can do is we can reassign the value to something else, let's say 57 to this variable. So the address of the memory remains same, it's just we are assigning it some different value or rewriting the different values to the same variable or at the same address. Now what is happened is the value 10 is been overwritten with value 57 onto the same address, and when the second time the program will try and fetch the address location using this variable, it will find the updated value which is 57 in this case. And that's why if we are going to run a program, you will see that you will find a value 57 in the second instance. As you can see, the first time it has written a value 10, and after that we have overwritten the value within the same memory address, right? So this is how the variable works. Now let's look at the assignment of the variables. How does it look? How do we define that? So there are certain rules which are required to be followed in C# to assign the variable. For example, you cannot assign a variable with starting from a number. For example, 3 days is not a valid variable name. Also, you cannot have a variable with any of the special character. For example, I cannot have a variable name as in var abc. In this case, dollar is a special character, so I cannot have a variable name created with a special character. It says it's not allowed. Even let's say after the name I can't have it. I cannot have a dollar sign as well. Also in between you can't have it. So basically with the name of the variable which you declare, you cannot have a special character. The only allowed special character you can use with C# is the underscore. So underscore is allowed by a C# compiler in case if you declare or define your variable name with underscore. Now other thing is the variables with C# are case sensitive. What do I mean by that? Is let's say I have declared a variable with this value or wherein a as in small a and then v as in capital A. Now if I would try to access this variable value as let's say capital A small var, then C# compiler will throw an error saying that this does not exist. So what does it mean? The variable types or the variable which you declare in C#, they are case sensitive, so they have to use as is how they are declared at the beginning. So just to revise, what is the syntax of a variable? So syntax of a variable is you have to define the data type, you have to have the variable name, any meaningful name, and then you can have a value assignment to that variable which is optional. In case if you want, you can assign it or you can assign it later on as well, as we have seen in the example. So let's talk about the types of variable we have with C#. So there are 4 type of variable we have with C#. Non-static variable type, or we can say that instance type of variable type. Then you have the static variable type. After that you can have a read-only variable type, and at last you can have a constant variable type. So the static variable type are the variable which you can declare with the keyword static. So let's say the variables are declared with the keyword static, and then I can declare it int value 1 and the value is 10 for an example. and then I can print this variable values like this. Right? So in this case, I'm declaring the variable inside this program class, and I've declared as an static variable, and now I'm printing inside this static void main method. If I run that, I should have the value of that variable printed as I'm expecting. As you can see, the value 10 has been printed. Now if I try and create another value which is of type non-static, and if I try and compile the application, I'm getting an error. It says that you cannot use a non-static variable inside a static method. So that's the constraint we have with the static method. You can only use the non-static, you cannot use the non-static variables inside a static method. Let me show you another way of declaring the static non-static variable. So what we'll do is we'll create a constructor of program class, and we'll give it the constructor override value as an value, and what we'll do is we'll assign this instance type to val. So whenever the instance of this program is going to be created, it will expect a value to be provided, and that value will be resetted here. Now what I can do here is I can create an instance of program class like this, object, and here I can pass the value as in, let's say, 70 as the value, and if I need to use the value of that which is been set up, I can access it like this. You can see that as soon as I enter the name of the instance which I've created at line number 23, I'm getting the private variable of that particular class, or the instance variable which are of the class. I'm not getting the static variable as an hint, I'm just getting the instance variable, because we have created an instance of the class. So all the instance variable you can get or you can access via that particular instance. So that's another thing you can do that. So let's rerun the program. As you can see that the first value is 10 and the second value is 70. The reason for 70 is because when this program is run, we are calling this program method, and which is a program constructor by providing the value 70, and then this 70 is getting assigned, and the value of this instance variable is getting overwritten from 99 to 70, and that is what we are printing it over here. So that's the instance variable to use inside this static method in case if you would like to use. Now the question is, can I change the static variable values inside the program? Let's try and do that. If I try and assign the variable values to 78, or maybe let's say 12 as an example, can we do that? Let's run that. Compile time, it has no issue as such. Yes, the value of the static variable has been changed again. So we can change the value of the static variable. Next question is, can we change the static variable value inside the constructor? So let's change this time the value of the constructor static variable using the constructor. If we do it like this, and this time we will print the value of the static variable. So let's see that if we are able to write it. I'll say 04, and let's print this now. So we'll print it 2 times. So you can see that this is line number 1 is printing the default value of the variable, which is static variable, which is 10, and then after that we are creating the instance of the program class by providing 2 values. One is for the instance variable, other one is for static variable. So the print of the static variable is changed from 10 to 44, and then instance variable is basically printed as in 70. So the question time, when the static and non-static or the instance type of variables are initialized. So the answer is, as soon as your program starts the execution, the static variable gets the allocation or the memory allocation in the system. So it's initialized as soon as your program starts. Whereas the instance variables are initialized as soon as you create the instance of your class. So the number of instances you create for a class within the program, then number of time the instance variable will get the memory allocation. So the life cycle or of the instance variable will be the life of the object or the instance which you have created, whereas the static variable's life cycle is going to be the class or the execution life cycle of that particular program itself. Let's quickly discuss about the constant variables in the program. So constant variable can be declared with the keyword constant and then the name of the variable. Usually you give the name of the constant variable as in capital value. So I say variable constant num, and that's how you give the values to the variable, right? I have to give the data type as well. So that's my constant variable. Now I can print this constant variable as I would like to print it. It's the same concept. Now the difference between the constant variable versus instance variable versus the static variable, the value of the constant variable cannot be changed throughout the program. If I try and change the value, then it will throw an error. For example, if I try and change the value of the constant variable like this, the compiler will throw an error, right? So I cannot do that. Similarly, I cannot change the value of the constant variable anywhere else as well. So let me try and run the program and see if it is working fine. So the constant value is printed successfully. So even though it is non-static, it is not a static type, it is not a non-static type, and it is not a even though it is not a static type or non-static type, but still I can access the constant variable inside a static method, which was not the case with the non-static or instance type of variable. So that's another difference you have. Now let's talk about our last type of variable, which is a read-only type of variable. Read-only type variables are declared with the keyword read-only, and then after you have to define the data types. Let's say I'll define it as a read-only database connections string for an example, and then I'll say that this is my database connection string XYZ. So that's the database connection string. Now if we would try and print this, let's see if we can do that. So I'm just trying to print the data type read-only type variable. We'll try and compile it. Let me stop the program. Variable as it was, and it is behaving the same way as it was the instance type of variable. Let me see if I can use the read only with the static. So yes, I can do the read only static as well. So when you do not use the static keyword with read only, which means that read only becomes the instance type of variable. The only difference between the normal instance type and read only type is read only cannot have, we cannot change the value of the read only anywhere. For an example, I cannot make the changes like this. I cannot do object dot, let's say I can't even, let me just run again, object dot database connection string, and if I try and updated value, I'll get an error. It says that read only cannot be assigned to in between the program. So how do I change the value of the read only? Basically, you can change the value of a read only from a constructor. So I can change it right here from this constructor. Let's say connection. So whatever connection value I can give it here. It's a DB connection. Like this. And now if I try and use the database program .this, it should work fine, and I can say that my DB connection, right? So this is another way you can use the read-only values, and this is what the result we are getting, my DB connection, which is the value which we have overwrite. Correct? Now question is, where in which scenario use the read only, in which scenario use the constant and instance type. Instance type is the default type you use whenever you require to use the variable. You go for an instance type. Constant is something within your class or your program requires some constant values to be used across the execution. Then usually you declare those values as in constant, so that you don't, or your program logic do not change anywhere, even though if they wanted to make any changes. Okay, then you have the read only. You read only, basically you declare inside a class so that it cannot be changed anywhere in the class, but it can be changed at the initialization of the class from the constructor, because as soon as you create the class instance, like in this case, you have the possibility to provide a different set of values to your read-only variables. So that is where you define the variable as in read-only type. So that's all about the variable types we have in the .NET program. I hope you have found this useful. If it is, please learn and subscribe to this channel to find more interesting videos. Thanks for watching it. See you in the next video.